Do you have rules for feeding your children? Today I'm talking about 5 rules that all parents should put in place for feeding their kids. Number 1, it's going to make it a lot easier. Number 2, it's going to keep you in charge. And number 3, it's going to make things very predictable for your children. So stay tuned, folks. We are talking about 5 feeding rules that will make feeding your kids a whole lot easier. Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Jill Castle. I'm a pediatric dietitian, and I'm here to talk about the 5 feeding rules that will make feeding your kids and running your family mealtime a whole heck of a lot easier. So my first rule is the ask first policy. So when I was growing up, we were not able to just go and help ourselves in the kitchen. But I find today a lot of kids are able to go help themselves out of the refrigerator, go into the pantry, take a snack at whatever time. And that's where feeding can get really off track. When your children are going into the kitchen and helping themselves all times of the days to whatever they want to eat, guess what? You're not in charge anymore. So my first feeding rule is to employ an ask first policy. So ask first means that you are telling your child that they may not help themselves to food in the kitchen without asking you first. So many of you might already have this policy in place, but if you don't, it can be a very powerful tool to just have a family meeting and tell your children that they may not go into the kitchen and help themselves unless they ask an adult first, preferably you or your partner or whoever's in charge for the day. It could be a babysitter. Again, this keeps adults in charge of food, and it helps you be able to guide your child in his food choices. So for example, if he goes in and helps himself to cookies out of the pantry, when he asks first, you can assess whether your child is truly hungry. If he is, then you and your child together can decide on what an appropriate snack would be at that time. So that is the ask first policy. Rule number 2 is the kitchen is closed. Now, this is my favorite rule. I used it with all 4 of my kids. It's very effective because it's a black and white concrete rule that children, even young children, can really understand. So the kitchen is closed is basically closing the kitchen, not with locks and doors and all of those things, but theoretically putting a limit, putting a rule around when the kitchen is open, which would be the case for meals and for snacks, and when the kitchen is closed, and that would be those times between meals and snacks. So for example, you have breakfast at 8 o'clock, breakfast is over by 8:30, and you announced, okay, everyone, the kitchen is closed until 11 o'clock, which is snack time, or whatever your timing will be. Essentially, for children who are really young, you want to create time frames of about 2.5 to 3 hours between meals and snacks. And for older children, you can stretch them to 3 to almost 5 hours for that teenager. But around 3 to 4 hours is a good sort of window of time in between meals and snacks. Now, why is this rule effective? Again, it keeps you in charge. It keeps your structure and your schedule around meals and snacks intact, and it supports your child's appetite. Believe it or not, having regularly timed meals and snacks allows your child to assimilate a predictable appetite pattern. So if you don't have the kitchen closed between meals and snacks, then you run into that problem that we just described when we talked about the ask first policy. You run into the problem where your child's running into the kitchen at any time of the day. There's no rule there, so they're helping themselves, and that interferes with their appetite regulation. That interferes with those appetite cues and the signals from the tummy to the brain that tell your child it's physically time to eat. So the kitchen is closed rule is effective because, again, as I mentioned, it's concrete. Kids understand it. They understand that if there's a time for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and there's a time for snacks during the day, and all the other times the kitchen is closed, they get it. They understand it. And so when you start this rule, obviously younger is preferable, around the toddler, even preschool age. School age children most definitely can understand this rule because, again, they are concrete, black and white thinkers. This rule makes a lot of sense to them. So give that one a try. The kitchen is closed. And you literally say, sorry, buddy, the kitchen is closed. It'll be open at XYZ time, and that's when we can figure out what your snack is or the next meal. Rule number 3, create a predictable schedule. I cannot emphasize enough how important a predictable schedule around food and eating is for children. It just gives them that reliable structure during the day. They know what's going on. They know when they're able to come to the table and eat. They understand the rules and the boundaries, like the kitchen is closed or the ask first policy. And that predictable schedule builds security. Children feel like they know what's going on, and there's no question about when is my next meal? What are we going to eat? All of those questions that some children ask a lot are an indication or can be an indication of insecurity around food. So creating a predictable rhythm and schedule with meals and snacks gives children that security that things are flowing and will be reliably present when they need them to be. Again, with a predictable schedule, that doesn't mean that you can't be flexible. You can. You can be flexible about lunchtime if you're out running around and you have appointments, but you don't want to be loosey-goosey or willy-nilly about your schedule for meals and snacks. You want to keep it as predictable as possible. And this not only includes the timing of your meals and snacks, it also includes where meals and snacks are located. So are they always in the kitchen? Are they always at the dining room table? You get to make that decision, but the more predictable and routine that location can be, again, the more secure your child will be around food and eating it. Number 4, that rule is all about staying in charge of food. And what I mean by that is that you set the menu. You determine what the snacks will be. You determine what the meals will be. And by the way, if you need help with that, I have a course on thenourished.child.com called the Nourished Child Blueprint that helps you figure out your food patterns and balanced meals. You can get the full course, or you can get a mini training that just focuses on setting up a healthy food system in your home. And if you have questions about healthy snacks, I have a healthy snack planner, and I also have a book called The Smart Mom's Guide to Healthy Snacking that can help you. But the reason I want you to stay in charge of food is because when kids become the main decision maker about food, oftentimes those decisions aren't great ones. Right? Kids don't know about what's good for their bodies. They're learning these things over time, and they need a guide like you, parent or caretaker, to make the decisions around food, to make the decisions about nutrient-rich foods, to make the decisions about sweets and treats. So I want you to stay in charge of the food menu. That doesn't mean that you can't have a conversation with your child about his food preferences. That doesn't mean that you can't be flexible. That doesn't mean that you can't negotiate these things with your children. But the overarching theme is that you're the parent, you're the adult, you're the one that should be in charge of food, not your child. And then rule number 5 is to embrace guided choices. So guided choices are those options that you allow your child to make a decision from. So for example, you might say to your child, we're having fruit as part of our snack today. I have bananas and I have grapes. Which one would you like to choose? That's a guided choice. You are telling your child, these are the two options we have available, but then you're giving your child the opportunity to make the actual choice. Now, when you give these options, you want to keep them reasonable. Obviously, you don't want to have to run out to the store at the last minute and get grapes. You want to have foods that are on hand, and you generally want those foods to come from the same category. So if you're serving vegetables for dinner, you might say, I've got broccoli or I've got corn. What sounds good to you tonight? So you're giving your child the options. That's a guided choice, but ultimately you are handing over the actual choice to your child. What does that do? It builds autonomy in your child, it builds confidence, and best of all, cooperation. So when children are able to have a voice in what goes on their plate, they can be more cooperative about eating it. That's what I have for you today, folks. I hope you enjoyed these 5 food rules for families. I guarantee it'll help you ease any strife or struggle you have around mealtime or snack time. Give it a whirl. Try one of these food rules out and let me know down in the comments how it goes. And while you're down there, please subscribe to this channel. I produce a video about every week, and it's all about child nutrition and feeding. I'll see you next time.